The day got away from me reading wise, but I did manage to recall a couple of short stories that are train related that I decided to pull out and read. This is from a pastiche series by August Derleth, uh, about the character named Solar Ponds. The Memoirs of Solar Ponds has a train story, and so does the Chronicles of Solar Ponds. And I love these old Pinnacle editions. I used to own them in these very warped, water damaged copies that I was very happy to get from eBay. I was glad that somebody's willing to sell water damaged copies because I love Solar Ponds, who is a pastiche of Sherlock Holmes. Um, very, very close in flavor to Sherlock Holmes. August Derleth, most known for, here he is. Here is Mr. Derleth. In midlife. He is mostly known, justifiably, I think, as a member of the Lovecraft Circle. He wrote some pastiches, probably his biggest contribution to, besides his pastiche, his own Cthulhu mythos stories is. Well, he kept, he's a hero to Lovecraft. He should be. A lot of people hate him. God knows, with the literary feuds and things, but he is more than almost anyone responsible for keeping H.P. Lovecraft in print in by creating Arkham House Publisher, which is probably most people who are watching this have heard of. He created it with another guy. They created that publishing house in order to preserve Lovecraft's work, and of course he was part of that circle. He also did these pastiches, which is probably the third most thing he's famous for. The second most thing he's famous for is he was a well-respected, well accoladed. That's probably not a word. What they used to call a regional novelist. He wrote, but he was born in Wisconsin. He lived about 71, I think. Oh, I have to do a correction at the end of this video on something I said yesterday, so stay tuned for that. But I'll just talk about these stories. Where's August Derleth's page? He wrote these. His grand plan as a mainstream writer was to write what he called, and he wrote a lot of it, the Sac Prairie Saga, about his native state of Wisconsin. He won a Guggenheim Fellowship to do it, which people still win today. It's a very prestigious writing fellowship. Or I don't know if this is the same as the Genius Grant, or he was sponsored for it by Sinclair Lewis and Edgar Lee Masters of Spoon River Anthology. So he had those two pedigrees. He was highly respected in the Weird Tales world. His first story was sold to Weird Tales, and he became a correspondent with Lovecraft, and he's important for those things. I don't know if those Sac Prairie books are read today. I haven't read them, I must admit. I don't even know if they're in print, but he also loved Sherlock Holmes. And when he was young, I think just in his teens, he read an interview with, so what year would this have been? He was born probably around the turn of the last century, around 1900 or so. Oh man, I lost the page again. It was 1909 he was born. So as a young man, he read an interview with Arthur Conan Doyle, who was at the end of his life, near the end of his life. That Conan Doyle, and this is probably not the first time he'd said this, but he, it was maybe one of the last times he said it, said he was done writing Sherlock Holmes stories. So he wrote to England. He got this idea as a teenager, just out of his teens, naively wrote and said, I love the Sherlock Holmes stories, Mr. Doyle, Sir Arthur. If you're not going to write anymore, can I write them? And and like a year later or something, at least that's how I remember it, months and months and months later, he got a response to his fan letter who said, thanks for enjoying my work, whatever, you should probably just write your own stuff. So it was a very polite letter. But he didn't let it go, and he kind of took that like literally, and he started writing this Solar Ponds character, which is exactly Sherlock Holmes, except with different name. His Solar Pons' partner in crime, his roommate, his chronicler is a man named Dr. Lyndon. What was his name? Oh boy. Dr. Parker, Dr. Lyndon Parker, who's the Watson character. He tells the stories exactly about solar ponds the way that Watson would tell them about Holmes. I really like them. There's about, I don't know, there's quite a number of them now because they've been recollected. There is, I'll show you the covers that they currently have. If you're a Kindle Unlimited subscriber, these are all on Kindle Unlimited, so you can read them with your subscription, no extra cost. Don't know how much they cost though, but they've been reissued and restored by David Markham. I know I'm really hard on covers of modern books, independent books. I don't particularly like these. I wish they had managed to get the rights to these old ones from Pinnacle, even though they're, considered kind of second tier for, where's the other one? I think I deleted it. I must have deleted it when I was scanning, but anyway, these, I guess they're not available, or there's just no way to get the rights, or it was too expensive, or maybe they're just happy with these. But the important thing is that these are all in print now, all these stories, and they've been renumbered. See this one in the Pinnacle, was it Pinnacle? Yeah, Pinnacle Press. They kind of renumber them just based on when they brought them out. This is actually, says number 3. It's actually the second volume, Memoirs, and it has a story in it, which was written, doesn't say on the copyright page, but it was written before 1951, called The Adventure of the Lost Locomotive, which is kind of really kind of a direct take on an Arthur Conan Doyle story, which I haven't read, called The Lost Special. I remember liking this story a lot. It came to my mind when I was thinking about train stories, but I neglected to mention it in any of my other March on the Rails videos. I reread it tonight. It's still very good. It's very clever. It's very Holmesian. They start out, they are called to, hired by this train locomotive transportation company because they lost a coach. It's completely disappeared, and they start from the premise, very Sherlock Holmesian logical premise of, okay, well, one thing we know is it did not literally disappear, so we can eliminate that, and we just have to find it. And it's a very clever story. There is another one that appears in, I wish I hadn't deleted that other cover. Let's see if I can find it, the Chronicles. It's in the Chronicles of Solar Ponds. It was published it was written in 1965. It's called The Adventure of the Orient Express, which is really fun because in that story, Derleth does the thing that Philip Jose Farmer was known for in some of his Wold Newton works, is inserting other famous characters as sleuths. There's a character named Hercule Poirot. It's not quite the same Hercule Poirot of Agatha Christie because he is constantly referred to as a French detective, and he does work for the French police in this story, The Adventure of the Orient Express, which, as if you know Poirot, he would be freaked out at anybody calling him French. So as this character doesn't correct anybody, it is just a Frenchman who is a police officer who happens to have the same name as the famous Belgian private detective. And so it's a very fun story. I just wanted to recommend both of those and talk about August Derleth a bit because I really do. Sometimes I like the Solar Pond stories more than the home stories, just because they're kind of trashy and unpretentious. He really loved writing them. I mean, kind of the concept is trashy, just to do pastiche, and he really does excellent Holmes stories. There is one in I think the best story, the Memoirs of Solar Ponds, the one I've been talking about that has the Lost Locomotive story, has a story called The Adventure of the Circular Room, which Derleth actually did originally write as a Sherlock Holmes story and published it in a Sherlock Holmes fanzine. I've read that version too, and they're exactly the same except the changing of the characters. As time went on, he changed them a little bit more from the models of Holmes and Watson because he started to get called out. Well, a few of the stories were published in the 20s in a magazine called Dragnet. Yeah, Dragnet or The Dragnet, which is kind of a second tier mystery magazine. When that magazine was canceled, he kind of lost his market for them, and they kind of lay fallow for a while. He wrote a couple others. He wrote that Sherlock Holmes pastiche I mentioned, the Adventure of the Circular Room, which is probably his best story, his best mystery story of Solar Ponds. Until in the 60s or the 50s, Ellery Queen did an anthology, or the writers who wrote under the name Ellery Queen did an anthology of Holmes pastiches, and they included one of the Solar Pond stories, and that kind of revived Derleth's interest in writing for them, and he started selling them to Ellery Queen magazine and to Alfred Hitchcock magazine. So they had a kind of revival in the 50s and 60s. He wrote about, I guess, about eight volumes of stories, one short novel, Mr. Fairley's something. Later, they found another short novel called, I think, like Fire Over England or something, which is really not like a Holmes pastiche. It's more like a Sax Rohmer pastiche. I don't know if Derleth ever tried to sell it seriously or anything. They just found it after he died, completely written, and no one knew it existed. He never talked about it or anything. And it's a pretty good novel, but it's not like reading a Doyle. It's not like reading a Sherlock Holmes story. It is. I don't know what I started to say. It is. I'm very happy that all these stories are back in print. I don't know that they're selling well or not, but there is a second writer who Derleth gave the rights to, or obtained the rights to, called Basil somebody, who wrote even more Solar Pond stories. I haven't read those. That guy has Basil Cooper. He kind of has a bad reputation because he took the original Derleth stories. He went through and corrected the English. He tried to put them in chronological order, and so they're now kind of considered like bowdlerized versions. What I was going to say, oh yeah, so there's one of the changes Derleth made from Sherlock Holmes is Solar Pons' career begins basically in the 1920s, and I think most of the stories are set then. Maybe some are set a little later, so it kind of begins at the end of Sherlock Holmes' career. He got flack. I was starting to say before. I think he got flack as an American and as a person who probably never went to England, uh, let alone spent time there. Like a lot of Americanisms and mistakes, or he put a lot of things in the stories that a British person of that age wouldn't say. So he kind of retconned Lyndon Parker to say that he had spent a lot of years in America, which I think is a good way to cover it. I don't know if it does or not because I'm American, obviously, so I wouldn't notice those mistakes anyway. There's been attempts over the years to imply that Solar Ponds is meant to be like the illegitimate son of Sherlock Holmes, maybe with Harry, what's her name from? I had her confused with someone else. The famous, the woman in the Sherlock Holmes stories, or in the one story, but who appears constantly in the reboots. Or in another story, another theory is that he's the nephew of Sherlock Holmes who takes a different name so that he can rise on his own. And, that kind of stuff is kind of, to me, I really don't care that much about that kind of stuff. People really do like to link it all together, though. But I think they're wonderful stories. check them out if you've got Kindle Unlimited. Definitely, borrow one or two. They're very fun. I believe he wrote them out of pure joy, although he did make a little money off them here and there, and he probably restarted them again because of the popularity or of the interest from Hillary Queen. But he never really wanted to stop writing them. I mean, he never really resented writing Solar Ponds the way Doyle resented writing Holmes. At least that's the story we're given. It's really kind of hard to read the home stories and believe that Doyle didn't love writing them. So that's Solar Ponds. He wrote a couple train related stories. You could check out many books. Everything's in print. And if you do like him, leave a comment. Yesterday, I talked about this book. This is my correction from yesterday by Jules Verne. This is a very sloppy edition. I'm actually starting to wonder now if this is a translation not from the original French, but a translation from a previous American or British edition, English language edition, because I noticed on the cover up here, Michel Strogofff. I says, well, that's what I thought they would call. That's what I thought That's what I thought Jules Verne would have called his book, Michel Strogoff, because he wrote in French. But according to this copyright page, original title Michael Strogoff. So I was very confused by that. I finally, had the common sense to actually look up the original novel, and of course, it is called Michel Strogoff in French. So I'm curious about where that Michael came from, which is a little detective work, a little Solar Ponds-esque detective work from me today, thinking that it's either just a typo, or the translator of this actually was working from an American translation, from an English translation, which makes it a double translation, a translation from French into English, then from English into Spanish. So that's that. Very peculiar. Minor mystery. Minor literary mystery that probably makes is of no importance to anyone but me. But anyway, that's it for today. Thanks again.